Title: The Leaking King's Obsession. Written by author Iris. Iris stared at the picture in her hands, a tear falling down her face. This was the only thing she had left of her family. The family she had lost all in one night, after a ghastly fire outbreak had engulfed the castle, with strange men attacking. The picture she held was burnt around the edges, but that didn't matter to Iris. Their pictures were still clear as day. Her mother and father smiling, while her and her brother stood by the sides. A brief intro to who she was. She sobbed again as she recounted her sad fate. She was Iris 𝘱𝐿𝑧, the daughter of Alpha Nikolai 𝘱𝐿𝑧, who was also called the White Wolf of the North. He had been the alpha of the Gemini pack, right before the kingdom had been attacked. Before her eyes, he had been slaughtered alongside her mother, and she was lucky to even be alive. The memory evergreen in her memory, she recalled how they had been brutally murdered that night without second thoughts. The strange men wearing masks had swiped their knives across Sean, her elder brother's throat, almost killing him before her but failing. "Run, Iris, run, Sean, run." The last words of her mother resounded in her head, and looking back every second, little Iris and bleeding Sean had seen their mother being raped, dragged and murdered in cold blood. During their escape, Sean, who had been stubborn, not wanting to leave our parents, had rushed back into the palace, and even though Iris had warned him, it was too late. Ever since then, she didn't set her eyes on him again, and banished from the kingdom they had been separated. It had been years since then, and Iris had no idea where Sean was or if he was still alive. Maybe he was suffering somewhere, just the same way she was here. Iris huffed a sad smile on her face. She imagined how he would look like now, and if he was all grown and muscular just like she thought him to be in her memories. Enough of the past, though, Iris thought, already accepting her fate. She was born to suffer this fate, and now there was no turning back. Still young, and barely getting her bearings, she had ran through forests, eaten fruits and leaves, all tattered and battered, trying to escape for her fear life, until she had stumbled in the pack, where she was now. The Taurus Moon Pack, they were the only ones that had accepted her, and that was because they saw her as a slave running away from her master and nothing else. They didn't recognize her as the privileged daughter of widely known Alpha Nikolai, the White Wolf of Gemini pack, and she couldn't even tell them who she was just for the sake of her safety. If she did, her life would probably still be in danger, and Iris just couldn't afford that at all. She had been described as a slave, and that was what she instantly became. Washing clothes and cleaning up trash in the Alpha King's castle became her job in the pack, and she was reduced to the lowest rank of wolves, the one nobody gave a damn about. It was hard letting go of all the pain and anger inside her. The betrayal her family had to face and the unjust death of her father, at the hands of a traitor who was now the Alpha, or so she had heard. Denzel Beauregard, the Beta of Gemini pack, and he had been one of her father's trusted men, but he had broken that trust. She might be weak now, without a man in her wolf too, but Iris had it at the back of her mind that she was going to get vengeance, if not for her late parents, but because of the things she had gone through, all because of that vile, wicked man whom she thoroughly despised. Sniffing, she folded the picture up and placed it inside the drawer close to her small bed. Hands going to the pendant which she always on my neck, Iris began to use with the washed away jewelry softly. This was one of the last gifts her mother had given her before the tragic DVDT had happened, and now it served as a perfect protection, and it was also her most treasured belonging. This time she had a smile on her face, recalling some fond memories. and no sooner had she laid on her bed to have a good night's rest, did the door to her small room burst open, and in rushed 5 armed guards. Followed closely behind them was Zoe, and Iris hissed inwardly, straightening up to a sitting posture as she comported herself. This was a routine she was already getting used to, and she knew Zoe as always was here to cause trouble and try to ruffle her feathers. It was no new thing that Zoe, the adopted daughter of Raven Vitali, the alpha of Taurus Moonpack, despised her for reasons best known to her. Ever since she could remember, all Zoe had done in this castle was make life more unbearable and disastrous for her, and she took everything in stride, hoping that one day it would all end. Of course it would, Iris thought, sniffing back unshed tears and still steadying herself again. Trying not to even think too much, Iris cleared her head as she stared at the soldiers surrounding Zoe. They all looked exhausted and obviously tired, but it was pointless trying to prove any of that point to Zoe, of course. "Hey, Zoe," Iris greeted with a small smile, waving her hands at the soldiers in greeting, and spreading her grin to them.
"Oh, please! Cut the crap! Stop with your useless greetings,"
Zoe hissed, before continuing, "I'm sure you know the reason I'm here." "Huh? What do you mean?" Iris asked, confused, her brows furrowed nonchalantly.
"Seriously, bitch. You think I would fall for this act of yours?"
Zoe chimed in again, and Iris stared at her amused. What was she talking about? What was happening? She wanted to ask these questions and more, but she held herself back and instead said, "I'm clueless. Honestly."
"Where's my golden watch?"
Zoe's voice bawled out, her eyes turning red and looking all shades of pissed of this time. "Your what?" Iris replied, a little bit confused. Of course she had heard what Zoe said, but she didn't know why she was here screaming her head out over something she had no clue about. An awkward silence brewing. Zoe said nothing, and the only sound in the room was that of her heavy breathing as she stared round the room and back to Iris, watching her for a while before signaling the soldiers to search the whole room. Some of them sighed, albeit inaudibly, knowing the outcome of this search would be a disappointment, but nevertheless they went ahead. Besides, this wasn't the first time Zoe was doing something like this, and right now it was starting to become tiring even to Iris and the soldiers. The men did their best to make sure they turned her tiny room into a storm site. Searching every nook and cranny, they didn't spare a single spot as they ransacked the whole place bare. Even the area she was standing on waiting close to the bed was searched. But still, minutes later, they didn't see a thing. "Seen what you wanted?" Iris bravely asked Colette with a raised brow, and only got Zoe's red angry face, which was terribly shaking. She looked like a boiling kettle about to pop open, and Iris shuddered a little.
"Let's see if you'll feel so smug when Mother gets here."
Zoe smirked, and at those words Iris's smug smile instantly faded. For Zoe to involve her mother, the Luna Queen, in this, then she had something up her sleeves, and Iris didn't like this one bit. No sooner had she started thinking again, did the room's wooden door burst open again, and with 2 soldiers flanking side by side, the Luna Queen, Luna Talia, walked into the room. Even though Zoe was an adopted child, a girl Luna Talia had taken under her wings from the first day of her birth, Iris couldn't explain the feelings the woman had for the brown-haired girl, and like 2 peas in a pod, the both of them totally despised Iris. All her good efforts in the castle did nothing than cause more harm. Iris had done everything possible in this large mansion to get in the good shoes of this dreaded Lunawilla, but still it wasn't enough. She didn't like her, and this Zoe always used to her advantage. As the Luna Queen walked in, her cologne strong enough to alert everyone of her presence, the bones in Iris's body took a chill pill. Her face was beautifully adorned with makeup, and pieces of jewelry graced her neck, wrist, and fingers. Her haughty looks even made her more beautiful, and it baffled Iris, always wondering how such a wicked woman could be so gorgeous. She was like a pretty serpent, exuding bad energy wherever she went. Not that Iris could voice this out though.
What's going on here? Why did you send for me, Zoe?
She said bluntly, barely sparing a glance at Iris, and staring at her daughter. And just like a movie, Zoe began with her well-concocted lies, explaining how she was sure Iris had stolen her golden watch jewelry. She used the worst possible curse words as she addressed the matter, without showing the slightest regard for the Luna by her side. They didn't find anything, Your Highness. I am innocent of this accusation. Iris stuttered, hands clasped behind her back, trembling slightly as she bowed slowly. The Luna Queen observed her for a while, that Iris could note because while her head was bowed she could feel the burning stare on her skin. While her head was still bowed, Zoe moved forward, shoving her to the hard floor, and she fell hard against some documents the soldiers had dismantled on the floor. Zoe rushed her, pulling at the collar of my heavy coat, and raising her hands while Iris looked on defenselessly. She was about to slap her across the face, when the Luna ordered her to stop. She obeyed with an evil look in her eyes, moving away a bit, while Iris staggered, wobbling still and trying to regain her footing. Every single side of her body hurt badly from hitting the ground with such force, and she winced in pain as she struggled to get to my feet.
I swear to the gods, that watch must be on her,
Zoe screamed, and before Iris could even protest, she was by her side again, bringing out my coat pockets and ripping at her robe. Iris knew she was helpless, but still she tried to shove her away, and just then she heard a giggle arise from Zoe's lips, her hands out from her coat pocket as she dangled a shiny bracelet in front of Iris, and then back to her mother and the soldiers in the room who watched with their mouths wide open. She tossed it to the floor right before Luna's feet, a smirk on her face, and then she said defiantly, another wicked laughter bubbling from her throat.
See, I told you she's a dirty thief.
Chapter 2. Iris. The whole room was quiet, as if everything had gone into a frozen state. Nobody moved as the gold watch dangled from Zoe's grip. All eyes were on the watch, including Iris's. Luna Talia shifted her gaze to Iris, but her face was expressionless, confused, and in shock.
I knew she was a thieving bitch. Who knows for how long she has been stealing under our noses. This bitch is a cursed slave, damn it.
Zoe cried out. She looked like she was distressed, and Iris knew she was doing all her best to provoke her mother into doing something vengeful, and it looked like it was working.
I could swear to the moon goddess that the watch wasn't in my pockets a minute ago. How did it get here?
She cried out because she could not hold it in any longer. She was being framed here. It was obvious. Zoe rushed at her again, this time hitting hard on her chest, making her steps falter as she hit the wall, and before her feet wobbled falling to the ground, Zoe again tore a slap across her face. Her sharp fingers cut deep into her flesh, drawing a red line across her oval-shaped flawless face. If her mother and the soldiers weren't here, Iris knew that she'd try her best to fight back or do something, but now she could only stay still and receive the beating because any retaliation would spell doom for her.
What are you trying to say? That I put it there, is that it?
Zoe scowled at her, her eyes shooting daggers, and looking she could bite her head of any moment from now. It was a funny look for her ridiculously looking face. 𝘠𝐴 watched her in absolute silence. She wasn't going to say anything, but Iris knew what she was thinking. She knew what they were all thinking.
Why would Zoe here want to set you up?
𝘠𝐴 asked, her face remaining blank. Iris knew there was nothing she could say or do to convince the Luna Queen. Her opinions were useless, and worse still, Zoe was her precious daughter. She would always pick her side, and that Iris could tell as she silently judged her. She wouldn't even want to hear anything about the truth as far as it concerned Zoe. She just had to say one word, and then her punishment would be served, with the soldiers dragging her to Lord knows where. A stray blood from the open wound on her face dropped, staining her dirty dress, and Iris gasped in horror and pain. Her insides hurt so much that it was almost impossible to breathe without difficulty, but she still hanged on.
The only thing obvious here is that Zoe just caught you stealing from her. Or is there something else I missed?
The Luna Queen asked, her voice cold as usual, and Iris could literally feel the icy pellets in her words. She had expected it, but it still hurt nonetheless. She glanced at Zoe, who was grinning evilly, satisfied at the stunt she just pulled, and Iris' anger bubbled underneath despite how hurt she was.
Maybe I would take her diamond pendant for what she just did, Mother. Or what do you think?
Zoe said bitterly, a smirk on her face, and not even waiting for her mother to say anything, she took another step forward towards Iris, and yanked the chain from her neck, pulling the pendant with it. This time Iris' anger resurfaced, and she held her hand in place instantly. There was no way in hell she would let her take that pendant. No fucking way.
Let go, bitch.
Zoe yelled with anger, spreading inside her eyes, but Iris didn't care. It was like the two of them were the only ones standing there, and she did her best to stop her. With her grip on Zoe's hands increasing, Iris's long nails digged deep into her bones, but Zoe didn't even relent, pushing her backwards with her left hand, making Iris falter a bit still. She screamed in agony and still held onto the chain, while everyone watched silently.
Let go. She deserves retribution for what you did. Be happy it's just a pendant she's taking.
𝘠𝐴 said as she walked away to the door, but Iris didn't let go. Her claws digging deeper into Zoe's flesh, she tried to increase the pressure slightly, so Zoe would let go, and it seemed to be working a bit because Zoe's eyes started to turn red and glisten as if she was about to cry out in pain, and that she did.
Arg!
Mother!
Zoe screamed, and her wail was all it took for the Luna Queen to become angry. Stopping in her tracks, Iris watched as the elderly woman shot her a dirty look, then glanced at the guards and motioned them to overpower her. Instantly they drew out their sword, and Iris' eyes widened in horror because she knew what that meant. It wouldn't take anything for them to draw their swords and slay her where she stood. They obeyed the orders of the Queen, and they could kill her right then and there if need be, but still Iris just didn't want to let go. The residue of tears burning at the back of her eyes began to drop down, as she realized that if Zoe took this pendant, then she would be letting go of one of her most valued possessions. The only memory of her family. No. 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 She muttered angrily to herself, but there was nothing she could do. Subdued and tired, Iris let go of Zoe's hand finally, her shoulders dropping down in defeat as she began to sob slightly. It was either that or her sure execution, and she couldn't even imagine that.
You're lucky. I would have ended your existence for good,
Zoe said in a somewhat shaky voice. That indicated that she must be feeling some type of pain from Iris's strong hold. She watched as Zoe pocketed the gold watch with her pendant and walked up to her mother. As if that was bit all, she turned around and said,
"So, thieves don't eat. Throughout tomorrow you would have to go without food. That's your additional punishment."
Her mother said nothing, and followed closely by the guards. They all left, leaving her alone in the small sparse room. "Tomorrow, no," she mumbled, falling to the floor on tears, as she remembered that it would be her 18th birthday. How could she celebrate her birthday without having a thing to do? What a bad way to start a new age. Iris wondered, as more tears flowed freely down her face. Zoe knew this, and she had probably framed her up so she could ruin the birthday. It was much evident. Anger and hate made her face grimace as she watched them leave, the wooden door banging loud and square. Sobbing, Iris made sure to promise herself that one day, even if it would mean the death of her, she would make sure they paid for what they had done to her all these while. Retribution must be achieved. Sitting on the floor, unable to stand upright anymore, Iris cuddled up to a fetal ball while holding her stomach. The hurt in her chest was spreading everywhere, making her wet eyes sting all the more, as she continued to sob for a while. After a while, she decided to get up, struggling to find her footing, but it proved to be a difficult task that was most likely impossible to. So instead, she just decided to lay on the cold bare floor after so many attempts. The more tears she tried hard to hold back in, the more the pain in her heart increased, and so she she'd everything. Started slowly. The pain was just too much, and it got worse the more she tried to fight for control. She managed to stumble up to the bed and collapse on it. The bed was more comforting than the floor, but that wasn't enough to stop her tears. She hated them so much. She had so much hate for Zoe and the Luna Queen. She hated them all.
"Hey, Iris, cheer up,"
a voice said, bringing her out from her troubling thoughts. She instantly froze at the sound of the voice, looking around to confirm she was utterly alone in the room. And yes, she was. So where did the voice come from? Madness might have been one of the perks of getting to 18, and huddling she tried to control waning fear building up inside her. "Who's there?" she asked slowly. She knew it was a stupid and crazy thing to do, asking a question to an entity that wasn't there, but what choice did I have? "It's me, your dearest. 𝐓𝐴 I'm your wolf." Chapter 3. Iris. Sunrise came, and Iris woke up feeling strong and energetic. The smile wiped off her face when she remembered how Zoe had wounded her severely and taken away her diamond pendant. She was surprised though. Why did her body feel free, and it like nothing wrong with her? Normally, if she went through one of her numerous tortures, by the next morning everywhere would feel heavy, and she wouldn't even be able to move. But now her sides no longer hurt, and the red mark from Zoe's finger on her face was gone too. She knew this, because she picked up the small mirror by her bedside and her face was clear and free. What the hell? What happened?
"Your wolf powers are active now. You've been healed,"
a voice said within her, and Iris instantly recognized the familiar voice of her wolf, 𝘕𝐴, whom she had been introduced to last night. "Oh my goodness!" Iris exclaimed as a tear fell down her face. "Thank you, 𝘕𝐴. Thank you."
"You are welcome,"
her wolf said again, and this time it added subtly,
"Happy 18th birthday, Iris 𝐴.
"Whoa!" she exclaimed, looking at the wall clock in the room and realizing that it was 5 minutes past 5 a.m. It was still very early in the morning still, she bemused. Crying and feeling terrible about my situation had made her forget about her birthday even. Iris swiped at her face as a bubbly feeling arose within her. Today's was her birthday, and she had to be happy despite her circumstances. Worse still, she had so many reasons to be joyful, because now she had a wolf. A very nice wolf that had finally shown up just when she needed her the most at her lowest and darkest hour. She couldn't be more grateful.
From now on, it's going to be me and you. I'll be with you always,
𝘊𝑰𝑐𝑡𝐿 chimed. Thank you, 𝘊𝑰𝑐𝑡𝐿. I won't be alone. I'm so happy. This is the best birthday gift ever.
You were never alone from the start. I've always been here with me, but you couldn't hear or sense me until now. Also, let me tell you a secret too,
𝘭𝘭𝘪 said almost like a whisper in her head, adding,
you will meet your mate very soon.
Wait, what? A mate? How soon? I don't understand, Iris asked, jumping out of her bed in shock. The idea of a mate was something that had never occurred to her before, even though she had it at the back of her mind that she was probably mated to someone somewhere. Now, hearing this, she came to the realization that she was surprisingly looking forward to this.
Very soon, dear mate, very soon. I can't disclose much,
𝘭𝘭𝘪 said, much to Iris's disappointment.
That's all I got, dear.
Her mate now, she was feeling excited. Iris could still remember how much her parents, who were fated to each other, adored themselves. How her father was always in love with her mother, treating her like the queen that she was. He would move mountains for her sake, and that love he passed down to Iris and 𝘱𝑗. The memory was a painful one, but then Iris somehow felt that her mate would treasure me just as much, and she would be unimaginably happy with him. Apart from having her wolf, she would have a mate and she would never be alone. Instantly her stomach rumbled very loud, and remembering her starvation punishment today, Iris knew if she wanted to get any food today, she would have to steal it. She had to do it fast too, and now that it was early too, she could arrange her things and go look for something to eat finally. A smile on her face, as she reminisced once again that she finally had someone who was going to care for her, Iris went about her work. Even though the room was dimly lit as the morning sun had not risen all too well, it took Iris less than some minutes to put her room back in order, and she was able to arrange all the clothes and items the soldiers had destroyed in the course of their search. When she finished, Iris decided to rest a bit, plopping her as on her bed, her hands instinctively going to the pendant on her neck, but she froze. It was no longer there. Zoe still had it.
Let's go get it from her then.
Her wolf urged her on, but smiling a bit in fear, Iris shrugged the thought of,
let me just get something to eat, before anyone notices.
A few minutes later, Iris was already walking down the corridor. Everywhere was empty, just as she had predicted, and if she was fast then she could get to the kitchen immediately, without anyone noticing. Suddenly the strong scent of a strange rosemary perfume wafted towards her, and like magic the scent, which was becoming stronger, pulled her forwards, diverting her from what she initially wanted to do. Iris didn't know why she was feeling a strong pull to this unfamiliar scent, but her instinct was telling her that this could be her mate, no matter how unreasonable it sounded. How would her mate live in the same castle with her? It was most unlikely, and she tried to think about who this person could be. The scent was pulling her closer to a familiar door which she recognized as Zoe's door. The oak door, which was a bit open, and now tiptoeing as she stood still, the scent only increased, more strong and potent than before. And that's when she heard it, the sounds, or moans rather, and craning her ear, Iris listened.
Oh damn! Your dick is so good. I love it.
She paused, freezing instantly as she recognized that it was Zoe speaking.
Baby, fuck me. Yeah, just like that.
Zoe was having sex. It was clear she was enjoying whatever was happening so much, and Iris could hear the sound of flesh hitting, the movements sounding like some engine belts. A blush up her cheek, Iris's heart began to bang hard as something invisible propelled her further, and before she knew it, she had pushed the door open, albeit violently, and she saw them. Wrapped together, she saw a man on top of Zoe, and he kept on fucking her. Frozen in shock, watching this illicit but arousing scene, the two people involved were so far gone in their pleasure that they didn't notice she was standing there. Iris staggered back, wanting to leave, but then the man craned his face to the side, and that's when a gasp escaped her lips as she recognized him. It was handsome Conan Vitali, the biological son of Luna Talia, and the upcoming alpha of the Taurus moon pack. Conan was the worst type of man to ever exist, and that she knew because she had come across him. He was a drunkard, flirt and womanizer who had slept with a lot of women, even some maids in the palace. Iris knew how long he had come into her, showing some interest, but she always warded off his advances. Fuck. Iris despised him. Now, though, she was seeing him in the worst position ever. He was sleeping with Zoe, his sister, adopted sibling rather, and she just couldn't believe it. This was a taboo, and even though they were not related by blood, it was just so unthinkable. She heard him groan loudly, his face thrashing wildly, and then realization hit her hard. This scent that had brought her here was definitely not Zoe's. So could it be Conan's? Oh, God gracious! Was this rascal supposed to be her mate? A sudden wave of irritation flooded her whole body, and staggering back she decided to leave sharply, but it was too late. Conan Vitali had seen her, and his mouth wide open, he held her in place with his piercing blue eyes while he continued to slide in and out of Zoe. Oh fuck.
Conan's POV. Conan had been smashing Zoe in her room when a scent had invaded his senses. Since he was doing something more important, he ignored it completely, focusing on fucking Zoe. Distraction wasn't an option now. The scent became more vital, and it was almost impossible to ignore, but he was so sure that it was berries of some kind even though he had no idea what type. He rarely heard someone's scent from afar this way, and instantly he had an intense apprehension that his mate had arrived. Still shaking the thought, he had focused on bringing Zoe to the brink of an orgasm, and just when he was almost done, he swiveled his face to the side, and that's when he saw her. Iris Ellsworth, our servant. Her gray's eyes trapped his blue ones. Conan's gaze roved over her in her flimsy tattered nightwear, and the satisfied look on his face earlier turned to one of lust instantly, while she still stared back, obviously disgusted at the sight in front of her. What he was doing now was forbidden, but no one knew, and she wouldn't say a thing because no one would believe her. Iris, what a surprise, he said slowly with a wink while he continued to slam his dick in Zoe. Surprisingly, seeing Iris turned him on more than he could imagine, and he wished she would get naked and join them, but his illicit train of thought got interrupted as his dick fell out from Zoe and jumped up of the bed, yelling her lungs out.
You thieving bitch! What are you doing here? Huh? Get out! Get the fuck out!
Zoe screamed at Iris as she scrambled to put on her clothes. Conan knew she was feeling embarrassed to have been caught, but as for him, he didn't feel a thing at all. Iris turned around to leave, and immediately he felt a tugging in his chest, a yearning he couldn't understand. He had no idea what was happening, and he didn't understand why he was feeling this war, but he couldn't let Iris go, at least not now. Wait, come here, he said, scrambling out of the bed, as he wore his robe and walked towards a stiff Iris.
What are you doing, Conan? We're not done here. Why are you calling her back?
Zoe whined angrily, But Conan didn't care at all. Instead, he spat out nonchalantly, "Give us some space. I need to talk to Iris about something." His eyes cold, Zoe was about to protest but saw the look he was giving her, and even though this was her room, she knew better than to just obey his request. She started to close the door, but before she did, she whirled around, this time facing Iris as she threatened.
"If anyone hears of this, I'll make sure you rot in hell. Be careful. Conan is mine. Got it?"
She yelled again, pushing at Iris before finally leaving. Soon, they were alone, and he gestured for Iris to come in. With her curves swaying him, and licking his lips in anticipation, Conan was hypnotized by her small form. Hypnotized by the fact that she aroused him. Her head bent, shy at the same time. She asked slowly,
"So, why am I here? What do you want from me?"
That scent from earlier increasing again, his hormones heightening and his wolf leaping. Conan finally knew the reason why he freaking felt this way. He said softly, a satisfied smirk on his face, "I'm sure you know why."
Huh?
She asked, confused, and he replied with a wink, "You are my mate."